Good morning. This is John from the Springs Mennonite Church, and I'm here with you in the middle of the week. And I hope you're having a good week. It is a good week. Fall's beginning to show up around here, or at least it sure looks like it. Feels like it too. And God's doing some great things. He just always does. So I hope that your week is indicating that. And if it's not, well, hang in there. God has a way of showing up even when we didn't expect it. So I'm going to continue my study here, my comments about the book of Joel. And remember, this is a book about God's promise to love his people. Even in the midst of judgment and problems, God's grace is still there. That's what the basic of the book is about. And so today I'd like to read a passage, one verse actually, from the second chapter and verse 17. And here's what it says. Let the priest who minister in the Lord's presence stand and weep before the entry to the temple and the altar. Let them pray, spare your people, Lord. Don't let your special possession become an object of mockery. Don't let them become a joke for unbelieving foreigners who say, has the God of Israel left them? Well, this seems a little strange to stop talking, but I'm going to, because that's what I decided to do. But this is an interesting verse. Remember now, this is a book about God talking about his mercy, even in the midst of whatever. And it starts out, it says that let the presence of the ministers who stand in God's place. Now, the priests in the Old Testament days were God's special people. Today, ministers, well, I don't know how to say this. Some people think ministers are supposed to be special. Uh, Ministers like me understand that we're not. We're just people who have a different calling than the plumber or the teacher or the salesman. But be that as it may, in the Old Testament, the priests were really, really special folks, and they dressed accordingly. They had all kinds of fancy stuff on. And they always had to do the work of the temple. And the temple was very segregated in terms of this happens here, this happens here, this happens there, this doesn't happen there, and so on and so forth. So in this case, Joel is saying, let the preachers stand and weep between the entry room to the temple and the altar. Now, the altar is the most sacred spot. And Protestant churches today, we don't really have an altar. We have a communion table, perhaps. Sometimes we use the word altar, but that's not really what we're like. The Catholics and the more liturgical churches, like the Lutherans and the Episcopalians, would have those, but the rest of us don't really look at it that way. But here, what we do is we see the priest standing between the door, which is where everybody gets to come in, and the altar, which is the special place of God. And Joel says, let them stand there and let them pray, and pray this. Let me put my glasses back on. Spare your people, Lord. Now they're praying to God, just like you and I today pray to God. Spare your people. Don't let your special possession become the object of mockery. Don't let them become a joke for unbelieving foreigners who say, has the God of Israel left them? Well, this prayer is one where Joel is saying to the priest, don't let unbelievers make fun of your presence. Don't let them say that their religion is worthless. And especially don't let them say that God has forsaken them. Now, in our world today, we don't quite have the same context. I've never had anybody say any of those things to me, um, but I have had them say, there is no God. There isn't a God. If there were a God, then, and I've had many people say, well, if God would just then, and we as believers understand there is a God. But in this passage and in our lives, when trouble comes, that's when it's easy to think, well, maybe there isn't one. Or, well, maybe he just doesn't care. Or, why would God be concerned about me? You see, all of those things, all of those phrases, all of those attitudes demonstrate what we think about God, not what God thinks about us. Do you hear that? It's the way that you and I wonder about God. It's not the way that God looks at us. And so Joel says, don't let foreigners or unbelievers say the God of Israel has left them. Whatever happens in your life doesn't matter. However bad it is, God hasn't left you. When you're struggling, there's even more reason to understand that God is struggling with you. He's there. He's guiding the show. Now, I know I've been in times when I was really struggling and I didn't think anybody was guiding the show. It was only until later on that I could look back and say, oh, yeah, I saw that. Oh, yeah, I saw that. Oh, yeah, I remember that. But at the moment where the pain and the struggle and the difficulty is the greatest, is when God really is the closest. Now, I don't know how you look at your life, but I do want to suggest that the next time you approach one of these moments, or if you're already in one of these moments, just remember, Joel says, even in the midst of trouble, God's grace is there. This passage says, don't let anybody tell you that God has abandoned you, because he hasn't. Well, I hope you'll think about it. If you have a need or prayer concern, let us know. We'll do everything we can, as fast as we can, to help meet your need. Thanks so much for listening. I'll be back tomorrow with another passage from the book of Joel.